Welcome to Grow Fast, Grow Smart, the PI Playbook by Accelerator, the podcast exclusively designed to help personal injury law firms reach their full potential and serve their clients better. Let's jump in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Floyd, CJ's Chief Creative Officer, and with me today is Dave Rumsey, our Scripting and Content Manager. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me.
So excited to talk to you today. Today, we're talking about the art of 30-second storytelling in legal advertising. But before we kind of jump into that, tell me how long you've been doing this and kind of what your impressions were of legal advertising before you knew what you know now.
Yeah, great. As of last week, I have been doing this, writing content for personal injury lawyers for 16 years. My 16-year anniversary at CJ just came and went. And yes, thank you. My impressions of legal advertising before I started here was I didn't know anything about it. I knew a little bit about advertising in general. I knew a little bit about writing before I got here. I didn't know anything as to why somebody would need a lawyer. I didn't know what personal injury lawyers actually did for people. And I didn't understand anything about how the process worked. I just knew that I had seen these commercials and that was something that you might do if you were ever injured in a car accident. I didn't even fully understand, and this may be something you did as well. I didn't really fully understand that there was like this focus on automobile accidents. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was a wide open frontier, and I didn't even grasp that simple concept.
You know, honestly, I feel like I was fairly dismissive of it before. I was like, lawyer commercials, like that must be something easy. And then really getting into it, because we've been together all these years, really getting into it and realizing that it is so much more specific and so much more dense than maybe it appears on the outside. And you've been a great part of the CJ success. I hear from clients all the time that CJ scripts are superior, that we have the best scripts, that nobody writes scripts like us. It's a compliment that we get time and time again. So tell us a little bit about why scripting matters and how it drives success.
Yes. So scripting is a huge component of legal advertising. It's a really important part of what we do at CJ. In fact, I'm constantly blown away by how much effort and attention we give it. And as you said, we've had clients who have drifted in and out of our orbit. And a lot of times what brings them back is our ability to create effective content and messaging. Certainly, we understand bar compliance, the bar compliance aspect better than your traditional ad agency. But what I feel like really allows us to write effective content is our deep understanding of what makes accident victims unique from the broader universe of consumers and how to persuade them to act. And that's one of those things that's really difficult and did take time to learn and wasn't something that you could possibly know from the outside looking in until you really dig into it.
Well, share a little bit of the secret sauce with us. What do you think makes accident victims unique? How do you kind of address the challenge of scripting to accident victims?
Yeah, well, what makes them unique is that, and what makes this challenge unique is that you're trying to persuade people to do something they've never done before and they really don't want to do. What I mean by that is hiring a personal injury lawyer is a sudden have to proposition for a consumer, in this case, an accident victim. It's usually
let's research
right.
on your TV.
Yeah, right. It's not like coffee or going to a big box store. It's, or buying your airline tickets or your favorite shoes or something like that. It's people understand how those things work. And through trial and error, they've been able to find the products and places and services that work for them, that they can afford and they can trust. And the question in those examples for those consumers, like all of us, isn't should I drink coffee or not, or should I go to Home Depot or not, or whatever. It's which one and where and how much, but for a PI, it's not that simple. The first question is, should I do it at all? Mm-hmm. The first fundamental obstacle is convincing them of the fundamental decision to get a lawyer.
To actually do it, yeah.
Actually do it.
The people who are never going to do it, the people who might do it, and, the people who already know someone, right?
Yeah.
If you think about those groups. So how does that apply to personal injury marketing? How do you kind of address it there?
Yes. And well, The first mission, as you have said in many client pitches, and we all agree with, is that the first mission is to get people to remember you and like you in that order. And that is very true, especially for like young brands, people new to marketing. They've been practicing law for a while, or maybe they just opened their doors. But so the focus there needs to be like brand awareness. That's what would be lacking for those newcomers to the marketing space. That's what they don't have. They don't have what we call brand equity yet because they just haven't been out there. They haven't been putting their names and faces on billboards and ads and things like that. But the name of the game here is direct response. And direct response means you also have to get those people who are now aware of you and like you to call you, to convert. And that puts a ton of pressure on your messaging and therefore your scripting. Because when you kind of
30 whole seconds.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you got to do all that in 30 seconds. And that's true. 30 seconds, obviously, that's our wheelhouse. That's what broadcast means to people. Traditional broadcast is the 30-second spot. But that's true about all of the channels and avenues because you're also just talking about people's attention span. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Okay, so fine, you're not limited on a YouTube pre-roll or in a email or something like that by like the confinements of a 30-second ad buy. But you are dealing with somebody, people only have about 10 or 15 or 20, or it's about 30 seconds no matter where you're putting it. So a lot of the same rules apply and a lot of the same objectives apply. And in that time, so if you think about it, in that like 30-second 20, whatever it is, attention span or time, you got a couple things you got to get done. You got to get your name out there in a catchy, memorable way. You got to present yourself using language and tone that makes people like and trust you. And finally, kind of most importantly, you got to deliver like a nugget of substance that communicates the benefit of choosing a lawyer or warns them of the consequence of not doing that. It's kind of two sides of the same coin there. And you also kind of need to keep it all organized, whatever that message is. It's like you're constantly thinking about like what concerns do they have, not just like in the broader sense, but like what concerns do they have that I just brought up, that I just raised a concern for them. Now I got to answer it. So you got to kind of organize it to where you're always anticipating and answering. And that is
our firm needs to be the solution, right? And they are the solution if anybody doesn't know. But, it was interesting. You were talking about attention spans. And I know recently we were talking to Google and YouTube reps, and they really have like a specific chart of where attention peaks and falls. And like that first little hit is like, 6 seconds in, and then you go a little bit longer and there's another hit. And it's just really interesting to see how well crafted a message has to be to penetrate because our attention spans are so short and we're so good at tuning things out.
Yeah, you got like the skippers, the 5-second skip. So you got to get your name in there in the first 5 seconds. Well, we do that a lot in broadcast too, and then from there, for the people who have hung on for 6 whole seconds, then you can start to like layer them in some stuff, but you still are going, but you're still kind of after the same people with the same problems. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah, structurally it's going to change, for what in the different mediums that you're talking about, but the core is going to be, there's going to be a lot of consistency.
So thinking about attention spans and managing all of that, talk to us a little bit about how, what's the difference between a script that's more generic in nature and one that's really going to resonate with injury victims?
Yes. So an example of a generic script, you could just go to like prompt ChatGPT or some like your AI generator of choice, and it'll whip you up something that's going to be pretty boring and boilerplate and uncommitted and generic kind of crap all up. But like I said, to sort of understand those core messages, those things that like the first thing you got to understand is like, what are the core needs of somebody? And the reason I say that they kind of are consistent and kind of the same ones kind of keep rising to the top is because the needs of an accident victim are the same no matter where they are. Meaning like a broken leg in Tennessee hurts just as bad as it does in Philly or California.
Sure.
A car accident victim's pain and stress are like the same in Texas as they are in Connecticut. And so are the immediate needs that go along with that. And so yes, there are. So you're kind of dealing with that. You're dealing with like that kind of fear and that kind of pain, no matter what. And so that's the first thing that is like You got to like make sure you're giving them something really, really directly connected to those kinds of needs. But what makes it kind of resonate, like where like the nuance and the texture and things kind of come in, I think it comes down to 4 things. The first thing is you really got to visualize a specific archetype of an accident victim and where they are emotionally. Like you start to write, I start to write, you start to write, you think of a person, or a type of a person, and think about like, okay, well, what is that person like? Like it just sort of informs like every little choice you're going to make after that.
Well, and Dave, sorry to bust in,
Yeah.
but I think that's a great point, and I don't want people to miss it. You said emotionally, not physically, and I think often people's brains go right to injury, and an injury, I think, is something that everybody realizes needs to be taken care of, right? You have a broken leg, you have to go. You're not just going to walk it off. Like you have to go to the doctor. But I think you hit on something that's important, which is they have a lot of stresses and emotional concerns. And that's maybe what's keeping them up at night or what they're worried about. Like most people know they have to see a doctor for serious injuries. But I think that's really smart to call out the emotional component, because I think that's a big part of what people are suffering with.
Totally. It's a big, life is disrupted. I myself have been in a car accident, very minor injury, but it was an injury, but it was all of it. That was such a pain. No car insurance company called me same day within hours of arriving to the medical place to have my hand x-rayed and things like that. It is a really uncomfortable place to be in. Lots of what am I going to do today, tomorrow, a week from now? Is this all going to play out kind of questions?
And you're somebody who's well familiar with the process. You knew what to expect, and it was still overwhelming, right?
Yeah. I was still at the scene and already thinking about calling a lawyer. I already had my game plan, and it still was stressful. And so that's the first thing, is to visualize that archetype, that accident victim, and then 2, deliver a solution to them in a very clear, impactful way. And that can be that's pretty simple and straightforward. Get your name out there as the solution and give them something to do. And then 3, anticipate their concerns and answer those concerns with every line of copy. I alluded to that just a second ago. And then you do all that with a language that's easy enough for them to understand, that sounds authentic, coming from your brand. And I have an example, please, if I may. Please. Yes. So you remember, but some people may not know that CJ, we used to be under the same umbrella as a big intake. A national intake service. And it was pretty helpful because we got to interact, and we were, at one point, we actually did a little survey of sorts. It was kind of a big
survey.
It was a big survey. Yeah, it was a big survey. And what we did is we got about 10 of our clients who are also clients of the intake to allow us to insert a question into the intake script. And that question was just meant to give us like some insight into like what the thought process, what the concerns were of somebody calling at that moment and what they were thinking at that moment. But it also allowed us to just sort of look at the intake forms themselves, and we gleaned a lot of information about like demographics and gender, male, female, and who's calling and when and how soon after the accident they're calling. It just was validated stuff we already kind of knew, but it also hipped us to a few things that we didn't. And one of the big things that came out of that was that 20% of the people who were calling on behalf of somebody else, and a loved one, a spouse, or something like that. And that makes sense, right? Because some people are really seriously injured, and true to that point, it seemed like the people who were calling on behalf of somebody else were calling on behalf of people who had more serious injuries, good cases, high value cases. And so that, coupled with some other data that we had come across, some research we had found, and just some good, we also have an operational partner with Accelerator, and we have come to this belief, and it's true, that nobody makes the decision to call a lawyer without talking to somebody first, a someone else person, a person of influence. So like that someone else caller is kind of that person. And so we said, well, so that 20% suddenly, which is a big number by itself, frankly, that 20% suddenly was a much bigger number when you think about it in terms of like the person of influence writ large. So we said, let's write a script or 2 or so that is like just focuses on those people and that archetype and who might they be and what might they be concerned about. And so here's the script that we came up with. Like most of us, you do anything for your family. But what should you do if a loved one has been hurt in a car accident? Call Dave Rumsey Injury Law. We've helped accident victims all over Tennessee get through the hardship of a serious accident. We're here ready to help your family right now, and a free, no-pressure consultation is just a call or click away. Call us, and with our no-fee guarantee, if we don't win, you don't pay. So I kind of had to ad lib there at the end.
But hits on all the points, and that has been a very successful message for many clients. We can say here on the back end of having done it for a lot of people.
Yeah, and as you can see, that's really simple and straightforward. There was like 2-3 syllable words in there, and one of them was accident, and one of them was Tennessee. I mean, that just everything else was like a 2-syllable word. So it didn't have to get fancy. It didn't really have to get like overthought. It was just think about that person and go right at them. And that money concern would be a big one, right? Like, so that was something like, all I knew is when I started that script was like, we were going to go after somebody who's thinking about calling on behalf of a loved one, a spouse or something like that. And then as you get through it a little bit, you start to go, well, what's going to really kind of be a bugaboo for them is what's the entanglement of calling a lawyer? What am I getting into? What am I going to get my loved one into? What if it costs money? What if I make some commitment with that? And so it's like, that's a great time to bring up free contingency fee, no hassle, because that would be a concern that especially those people would have.
That's a great point too, that kind of, it puts in mind one of the things that we see a lot, which is, people want to keep the control as much as they can. And so one of the things that we see, because we are a 360 agency, is that people see the commercial and then fill out a web form like immediately after, because that is like a no pressure way for them to still kind of keep the power with themselves. Like, I'm going to reach out and then I can decide what to do with it. So that's kind of a side note, but a way that TV also feeds web, because people get the message, but they still want to be in control. So they do a web form rather than, talking to a person, let's say.
Right.
So it's just an interesting kind of piece there.
And, that example was very specific. It was a someone else caller, male, female, whatever. But you can do that. That's really the best way to write any script is so don't think of, maybe you don't have to think about like something that's based on data or whatever. You can just start and think about like, okay, well, I'm going to write this one for a working mom, the working mom who's been injured and her concerns about taking care of her family and providing and or, somebody who's just feeling down and depressed about the fact they were in an accident. They feel very unlucky. They're asking themselves, why me? Why this? And or somebody who's just kind of hesitant and cynical about calling a lawyer. I mean, you can come at them with some facts and something like that, and you just sort of let that all kind of inform all the words you choose and the kind of messages you're going to bring to bear on them. And it's just a very helpful technique, really. But it's also something that I think really helps the words resonate.
I agree. And I think one of the great things about what we do at CJ too is that we do a lot of client testimonials. And so we hear a lot of those. You were talking about the research that you did before, but we hear a lot of those concerns. And I feel like more and more lately, we've heard people talk about kind of, mental health concerns or mental health impacts, or just being able to hear firsthand when we interview actual clients of what their concern was, I think really filters into our scripts nicely because we've heard those concerns. In addition to that, when you mentioned research before, I think that's another thing that you do really well, that we do really well at CJ. Talk a little bit about pulling in new stats and research and why that's important.
Yeah, great question. We do keep our eyes open. There's, as I like to say, we check the traps every so often. We get out there. There's a couple of hot sources, like, there's some government sources, there's some insurance sources, and we kind of check to see if they've come out with something new or that we think could be useful. And then sometimes people send us stuff or, it kind of comes from up above. Mickey Love had sent us something just the other day, and we get in there and kind of fact check it and try to dig into it and see if there's some way we can use it. And there's two ways to do that. And I'm glad you brought it up, because there's one way, which is you find a cool fact and you use it like kind of did you know that the number one reason people call a lawyer is this, and this? And that's cool. People do like to know things. Do want to know the answers, but then there's other times when it's a fact, it's a factoid, and it doesn't lend itself to that kind of presentation. It just sort of tells you, it it helps you craft a message that just sort of gives momentum to the message. And so like another example is something like, for instance, the number one reason people call a lawyer is that a friend or family member told them to. And so we'll write like that is a good example. Like we didn't say 20% in that article, in that previous script I just said, we didn't say 20%. Did you know 20% of people call on behalf of somebody else or whatever? We just went at we just let that fact and that statistic kind of guide us to the approach of the script. Another maybe even better example of how to keep the messaging aligned from like statistics or research would be the fact that actually a lot of clients, something we learned is that very few clients actually spend a whole lot of time, a lot of accident victims spend a whole lot of time in a hospital or getting medical care. And then very few of them miss a substantial amount of time from work. And so we just stopped dwelling on lost wages and you've been in the hospital for a week. We just don't say those kinds of things because we know that's a very small slice of the population.
I think too, I was thinking, I thought that one of the examples you might bring up was the kind of State Farm. I think that's a great example of taking a stat that they were using to brag and kind of turning it on its head. Will you talk a little bit about that? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was something we just tripped across. I don't even know why I do know why. It was my job to kind of go around and look at, what some of the insurance companies were talking about. And we had looked at some of, it's hard to find national stats that pertain exactly to insurance trends but really personal injury law trends. And so it's like, well, what if we go to some of these specific like insurance companies themselves? Maybe they have something. And as you said, they had a look at us kind of page, a brag about us kind of page on their website. And it was like, we can process 35,000 claims a day. And they were bragging about it. They were super happy about it. So we took that and we said, did you know that insurance companies will grind out 35,000 claims a day? To you, you're just a name they don't know and a face they won't see. You don't want to be processed. You want attention from somebody, We took it and turned it on its head. And, and that is a did you know kind of statistic, formula. But I really like the ones that are sort of that don't. I'll tell you another funny one that we did was, it was based on statistics. We made a funny spot. It was based on a very real piece of data that the reason people don't call lawyers, the number one reason people don't call lawyers is that they don't think they need it. They don't think it'll do any good. They don't think it's necessary. And so we just made this funny spot that was like, a lot of people have seen it. It was just called Don't Need a Lawyer. And it was a guy who's his wife says, you were in a bad accident. Don't you need a lawyer? And he just goes, no, I don't need a lawyer. He shrugs it off as people do. And then you see all these crazy situations where he thought he didn't need something, like didn't need an electrician, got himself shocked. He didn't need to read the directions, and he was overwhelmed. He didn't need sunscreen, and he was sunburned. And I was like, remember all those times you said you didn't need something, but you did? Well, so it's just like, again, we didn't say, did you know the number one reason? We just made a cool spot that had some real momentum behind it because we had this information.
That makes me want to kind of add a little note and circle back to the beginning, because you were talking about they have to know you and then like you. And I think that so often people maybe look at a spot like that and go, see, that's great. That's funny. That will catch people's attention, and it will. But if you don't have any type of existing brand, how many times have you watched a commercial and thought, oh, that was so funny? And then somebody says, what commercial was so funny? And you're like, maybe.
Yeah. Who was that for? Yeah.
So it really has to, to kind of pay off what you were saying before, like they really have to have some association with the firm, have some awareness of the firm. And then those messages really hit in a way that you can't necessarily capture people's attention if they might think the spot was cute, but if they don't know that it was yours and how to contact you, then you're just kind of given entertainment to the air, which there's value, but you really want them to respond.
That's the story of the Super Bowl, right? Like how many times we debrief, we typically debrief after the Super Bowl, talk about all the cool ads we saw. What did we like? What did we remember? And I would say a third of them, people are like, oh, I love that. That was so funny. That was so good. That was so clever. And we go, man, what was that for?
Yeah.
And we're like, not only can we not remember, if we can remember who it was for, we can't tell you why the hell it was done for that, like done
Yeah.
for that brand. Like, what does that have to do with travel
Yeah.
insurance or something like that?
Yeah. Listen, probably the only one is like you go, oh, the cute puppies or the horses. I know who that's for. But other than that, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to, we talked about what makes a successful script. What are some common mistakes that you see, and how do you kind of avoid some of those traps?
Common mistakes we see are, there's a couple. And the first one is pretty obvious. It's jargon. Back to the language. Lawyers, you shouldn't use, too much legalese and jargon and technical terms that people aren't going to understand. But it kind of can sneak in there. Like one example is the word treat to describe getting medical care, getting medical treatment. It's a shorthand that a lot of law firms use with each other. Like, where are they treating and what hospital are they treating at? That's not the way the accident victims are talking about. They're like talking about where am I going to go to the doctor? Where am I going to get medical? Where am I going to get treatment, care, things like that? So you need to avoid like even a simple word like treat that doesn't mean the same thing to them as it does to you.
Demand package.
Demand package is the demand letter, the demand, those are, it kind of is self-explanatory, but it not in a little 30-second. When it comes at you off the side and it comes at you, it's very confusing.
Subrogation, like, one of the most compelling testimonials that we did kind of in my history at CJ, I remember us interviewing a woman who said, talking about how great and how friendly and how welcoming the firm was. And one of her biggest things was they didn't use any words I couldn't understand. That hit me so hard because I thought, oh, you know what? That's a real concern for people. And so I think you're right. When you're making your kind of quick 30-second or even like 2-minute impression, make it accessible, make it something that people can understand. So, leave the jargon to the side. Just really talk in a way that people can understand.
And likewise, don't show them too much of like the sausage making, we at CJ, we almost never use the word process. Like, we don't like to draw a lot of attention to the process of working with a lawyer, because we just don't want it to make it sound too difficult in a turnoff kind of way. And it doesn't mean you want to be dishonest and say it's all going to be easy. They already know it's not going to be easy. Yeah. They already know it's not easy. But you can
to say, like, I know that there are some firms who really kind of hang on the easy line. I won't name names, but I think many people are like, it's actually not easy. Even if I call the attorney and they take care of everything, it's not. I wouldn't term it easy.
Right. But what you can say is that you're going to make it easier. And that is honest. And that is the truth. That is what you should be doing. And so, like, kind of, that one's top level. A little more subtle would be, we kind of avoid words like hire and signing up and signing contracts. We'll sign you up. That can sound kind of tangly. And hire is, what's involved with that? It's like just call or connect or reach out, things like that are just easy, simple.
Yeah. Hire for sure puts me in the mind of this is money out of my pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Exactly.
What about money?
That is a big topic. So it's both a pitfall and and something you really need to think carefully about how you're going to approach the topic of money. And I have a couple of things to say about it. The big pitfall is avoiding talking about money. There are some lawyers who have expressed, and I understand it, that they're not comfortable talking about it in their advertising. And what they really mean is they're not talking about it in certain ways. They think it's dollars. When you're in a dogfight market, a cage match market, or whatever you want to call it, yeah, you might have to just go there. But but they, a lawyer might think it's crass or offensive to the attitudes of their community, or like you said, they just have a competitor in the market they hate that does it all the time, and they just don't want to be like that. And I get all that, but you do need to find a way to talk about it. Before I kind of get into that a little bit, there was once a client who came to us and said, this was years ago, and said, I don't want to talk about money at all. And I was like, really? And he was like, no. And I go, well, why not? And he goes, well, we did. And to their credit, they had done some self-reflection, some self-research, some self-digging into their process. And they really took good notes of every person that came in and did a consultation. Now I'm not talking the intake. I mean, the actual, this is somebody who's come in and is now a consulting prospective client. And he said, not in a single, we studied on 100 of them or something like that, wrote it all down, wrote down what they said. And nobody ever asked us about money. And I said, nobody? And he goes, nope. And I said, well, that omission is to me is a screaming cry for
Agreed.
you to talk about money. Like that to me, that's almost like it's deafening how loud that omission is from their thing. And it makes sense. Of course, you're not going to walk into somebody office of a lawyer, anybody you've never met before, and start asking about, well, like, how much money can you get from me? They don't want to appear
exactly
greedy or needy or desperate. They want to, they're trying to feel this whole thing out. And so they're begging you to say it. And they're never going to penalize you for bringing it up. They're going to thank you for bringing it up because it's the thing you're going to do for them. And it's the thing that's on their mind is what they need. They might need or might be at risk of losing.
Well, it feeds back into kind of what you were saying earlier. It feeds back into they don't want to, not the suing type has been a really strong message point throughout the history of this, because so many people are like, listen, I'm not looking for a check. I'm not looking for that. I just need kind of to be set right. I need to be, this wasn't my fault. I need to be kind of back where I was. And so maybe that feels contrary to them to be like, hey, money. But I think as you so wisely pointed out and continue to point out in all of our scripts, money is not just money. Money is medical bills. Money is being able to take care of your family while you can't work or while you can't get around. Like, money is so many things, and you probably have to be the one to bring it up. If you're the attorney, you probably have to be the one to bring it up, not because anyone's looking for, jackpot justice, to use the bad words, but because it's a real life concern for people. I don't know anyone who doesn't have any money concerns before a wreck, much less after an injury.
Right on. It's to the jackpot justice thing. If that is your concern, if that is somebody's like turn off or aversion to that subject, find the way to talk about it that you're comfortable with. Connect, and that means exactly what you just said, which is connect it to the needs of an accident victim. Just talk about the concept and the ways that it helps people overcome the problems after an accident. That so-and-so, a single mom, for a single mom, it meant she didn't have to go without making rent for a few months. It meant actually getting long-term care for a child that was injured. It meant a retired, nurse didn't have to touch his savings or anything like that. And so then it starts to become dignified and authentic and important.
One of the really successful things that we have put out lately also is like what we call before and afters, like what the insurance company offered, which is often insulting, honestly, and then what the firm got for, and it could be, I think knowing, hearing those numbers and knowing the type of injuries, I think really gives people clarity, because it's like they offered someone $500 who, had a broken leg or something. And it's like, well, wait a minute. So hearing how the firm got, what firm involvement meant for actual people, I think is huge.
Massive. It's the before and after thing is very educational to people. It tells the whole it tells all kinds of stories. It answers all kinds of questions for people. It tells you how the disparity between like what a insurance company would do and what a law firm can do for you in response. It shows you what's possible to people. Say there are people out there who are maybe a little greedier and a little whatever. And it's like, oh, wait, you mean that is the kind of money we're talking about? And that can be a good thing. And it also, it really tells you what law firms do for you. So it accomplishes like three things, and it does it in this really kind of memorable, splashy way. It's better than just blasting out the dollar amounts. You show them the before, you show them the after, and that really makes an impact on people.
So don't avoid talking about money. We can figure out where to put you on the spectrum that you're comfortable, that's still going to show the benefit, but don't avoid it.
Yes.
Any other common mistakes that we want people to avoid?
Just don't brag about yourself too much. There is a time and place to brag about yourself. And law firms, many of our law firms of our CJ Advertising clients have done amazing things and have been decorated and awarded and recognized. And we do talk about those things. The best place and time to talk about yourself in that way is when you're addressing the concern that an accident victim has. So when you start to talk about the need of a powerful, having the power to go up against a big, powerful insurance company and having a law firm that has the resources to do that and has the juice behind them to do that, then that's a great time to bring up, and we've won. We were super lawyer rated and won the AVVO, and we're the number one choice of across our market. Whatever you want to say, whatever is true and that you've done, that's a great time to do it. And you do it about that much. You do it, it's like one line out of the 6 lines in a script.
Well, it comes back to the thing that we always say, and maybe that's important to note here, kind of the lens that we're going to look through every script and every spot through is what's in it for the client, what's in it for the injury victim. And if it is just kind of ego, that's not really a benefit to a potential client. We are always going to frame it in how is it a benefit for them? And same thing, if you're talking about bragging on the firm or personal achievements, if that's a benefit to them, like you were saying, if a firm that has trial success is important, if there's a benefit, definitely do it. If it's just about feeling good about yourself and what you do, and we can't pinpoint a benefit to the client, then agree, I would say avoid.
Yeah. And that would stretch across your website. I mean, we've audited, been asked to evaluate websites and brand as part of the larger brand conversation. That's not exactly our wheelhouse, but people say, well, hey, take a look at this, take a look at our web, take a look at everything, all of our marketing. And that is a comment we have made. People who have come in cold to CJ Advertising is top to bottom, you're bragging about yourself. I don't see anything that's asking the prospective client what they need or anything that's tapping into what they are going through. You got your wall-to-wall bragging, and that needs to pinch down to about like a quarter or less of your content. But you need some. It's good to have some. And there's some clients out there like, hey, wait a minute, you wrote me a spot that was like wall-to-wall bragging. Yeah, one or two. We did like one out of your whole catalog of things. It was stayed in that same proportion. Yes, because they're, for the time people were watching that commercial, all they heard was like all the great things you have done. But in the big catalog, it's still a relatively small amount.
It sounds like there's some subtleties there, and maybe some word choices and ways to get specific there. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of psychology around how we do that and why.
Sure. So I would say the big concept, which I think is going to be meaningful to lawyers who might be listening or people who work at law firms, kind of goes to that topic of reptile. And we agree, we believe in reptile. We subscribe to that philosophy, right? To trial lawyers, they certainly know this. They've all read the book Reptile, and it's about beating the biases that live inside of a jury pool and trying to get like the unaffected juror to empathize with your claimant client and feel the threat and the fear. Yeah. And the idea is that inside of all of us, we have our primitive reptile brain, our cortex, our old fight or flight reflex, and that people's decision makings come down to that, and that's the overriding thing. They may be thinking logically, they may have an emotional component to what they're thinking, but they are the thing that's finally going to push them into deciding yes or no is going to come down to what's happening in that primitive brain, and we believe it. But and one of the places that is like instantly manifests itself is the argument of like accident versus crash. And that speaks to, there's a way that trial lawyers use and try to stimulate and leverage the reptile brain. And then there's some overlap with their marketing. And then there's the way marketers use it and should use it. And if you understand the difference, I think you can use it better in your marketing or as well in your marketing as you do, say, in your legal argument. Mm-hmm. And what I would say, the big difference is that while in your jury trial, you're trying to appeal to the unaffected juror, somebody who's not injured. In our marketing, we're talking to the person who is injured. Their reptile is very much awake. They are very much stimulated, activated, agitated. You're trying to judo them into doing what you want them to do. You don't have to like say, well, what happened to somebody else could happen to you. They're like, it already happened to me. And so So
I'm here, I'm listening, you have my attention.
So one of the funny thing, one of the big things, it's actually pretty topical right now is as I said before, the choice between the words accident versus crash or accident versus wreck. And there are some fantastic law firms with some brilliant lawyers, and I say that with in all sincerity, who will not allow the word accident to be spoken at their law firm. Pretty cool rule actually to have for a law firm that really is a heavy hitting litigating firm, to make that, to really have that kind of directive across their legal practice. Now, we are in the advertising business, and the truth is people out there do use the word accident. Mm-hmm. And there are people who have been in an accident who feel a little guilty or sorry, and they have no fault whatsoever. Sure. But that word kind of alleviates some of that guilt and sorriness. And it's what they say. And that's kind of it's a
key search term.
It's a search term.
You like it or you don't like it. That's one of the things that people are searching. So you want to,
Yeah, and that's the currency. That's really our currency, is what do people say?
Yeah,
and so we get into it with our. It's a good debate that we have back and forth with client to client. I usually lose, although it's funny. The lawyer who says that, who's the most insistent about it, he goes, I'm the one who always lose. I always give in on that. Everybody finally beat me down, and now it's accident everywhere. I was like, no, not in your advertising.
Well, it harkens back to what you were saying before, which is we don't want to be so insider with our language that only we as a law firm, we as a law firm in this sense, we as a law firm know that if you say the word accident, it actually means that like the average consumer probably doesn't care if we're calling it a wreck, an accident, or a crash. They haven't kind of, really thought through it to a granular level. They just want help. So if they're searching accident, we're fine with accident. If they're searching crash, we want to be kind of everywhere. Talk to us a little bit about, so we're talking about word choice and kind of how that affects. There are things that we can't say though. Talk a little bit about the type of things that you can't say. We're talking about bragging and how that can be good in moderation, but there are things that we can brag too much. What are some things that you can't say?
Of course, yes. The compliance factor, which, is something we have spent a lot of time learning from market to market to market and everybody's individual bar rules. But there are some common rules or thoughts that apply across all markets. And it basically comes down to a couple of things. You can't call yourself an expert in most places. You can't compare your services or that you're better than anybody else in any way, even if it's true, even if you're the top, verdict getting law firm in your market, you can't say it.
You could say that. We're the top verdict getting, but you can't say we're the best, right?
Like, right. You can't say we're the best. Exactly.
Choice.
Yeah. Yes.
You might what's true and compliant, but you can't just blanket we're the best.
You'd have a hard time substantiating the top, exactly. Verdict getting or whatever. And then you can't promise a result or even promise that you'll take a case. We almost always are trying to put in like a word like can or maybe or might or something, some sort of qualifier. Like, we can help you, meaning like we could help you, but like without saying definitively, we will, you call us and we'll take it and we'll be your lawyer. We can't say it with that much absolute. And let's see, you said you can't promise a result, but you can talk about like what you've done for others. You can't say you're better, but you can mention awards and recognition received. And in many cases, even if that's called like, the award was called the best lawyer of Tennessee or whatever, that's what the award's called. It's not on you to, and I've never gotten any pushback. I've written it several times for people in different markets. And I'm always kind of worried that some, extremely conservative state bar is going to come in and go, you can't say, that's exactly the thing you can't say. It's like, nobody so far has said that.
That's the name of it. I mean, I think that too, that is another real benefit to CJ clients is that we track kind of the countrywide, each state has its own set of bar rules and their interpretations. And that's something that we track. And we really pride ourselves on being compliant, on giving the most robust message, but nothing that's going to get anyone in trouble or overpromise, or that's just, another benefit of what we do is really putting you in a good light, but in a way that's compliant, that's not going to get you into trouble. And each state is, some are much more open, some are very, very strict. Looking at you, Louisiana and Florida, but it's just something that's just another service that we provide.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever actually done the best lawyer in Louisiana or best lawyer in Florida award for anybody, because I don't think we've even tried to go there. But every other state that has worked.
I don't think they name it that there, but they definitely have your choice number ones, that type of thing. So whatever we can use, we'll use. Kind of, we've talked about triggers, we've talked about elements of direct response. Can you kind of bring it home for us if we were giving people the TLDR version? What are the components of a good DR content, DR ad?
Yeah. So as you said, we've talked about the approach and then a good direct response. And this is like classic direct response. The recipe has 6 elements to it, and state the problem. And that can be as simple as saying car accident, at the top, or if you've been injured in a car accident, you got to state the problem very clearly. Introduce and repeat your brand as the solution. Introduce and repeat. We like to repeat.
Yeah, you have to get it, like we said before.
Show the benefit or the consequences, one or the other. Same, two sides of the same coin there. Prove that it works through social proof, such as testimonials, reviews, ratings, etc. Some sort of statement of confidence, okay? And like the no fee guarantee, or mention contingency billing, or something, a free no hassle consultation, something that just says you're not on the hook.
Yeah,
there's no downside of calling, but you're also gonna you're not gonna, we're confident that we're gonna help you, that we're gonna be successful. And then a clear call to action. I mean, that's just old sales. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of competitors that don't say their phone number or don't even put a phone number. They just leave, Dave Rumsey injury law, working for Tennessee. And you're like, well, what do I do for that? What do I do with that? Like, where do I call? What do I do? Again, nobody's ever going to penalize you for saying your phone number or telling them Dave Rumsey injury law. Call me today. Like I would much rather say something like that than just let it drift out there. With no clear call to action. You got to ask for what you want.
We say that all the time, particularly too with like how we label the spots and what case type we put on screen. And thinking about the call me and that type of thing. We once had feedback from the client of one of our law firms. It was an elderly lady, and she said, I called your firm because you were the only one who had the phone number up long enough for me to write it down.
Right. Wall to wall. We've done that. From second number 1 to second number 30 phone number. Pretty much.
You were the only person who had the number up long enough for me to write it down. You can't discount that. You have to kind of pay attention to all those things.
Right. And there's no penalty for doing it.
Exactly. No downside. Well, Dave, thank you for all of this wisdom. I hope that people have learned a lot. Can you kind of, final thought, kind of bring it all home for me?
Yes. Bottom line, from a writing style standpoint, and I say this for anything you want to write. It doesn't matter if it's a, ad for Cartier watches or computer chips or personal injury, or you're trying to write the great American novel. Make your ideas impactful. Keep your language simple. Nobody will ever say to you, I like your message or I like your story, but the copy was just too easy to understand. Nobody will ever say that.
I got it too quickly.
It was just got it too quickly. It was just too easy. And so, keep your audience in mind. Let your ideas be provocative. Keep your words short and punchy. You'll be in good shape.
I love it. Dave, thank you so much. This has been so fun. Obviously, we talk every day, but it's nice to really talk about something that we both are energized by and both really love. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jen. And thank everybody for listening.
That's a wrap on another eye-opening look into the personal injury world. Thanks for listening to Grow Fast, Grow Smart, the PI Playbook by Accelerator.